Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Madam Chairperson, Acting President of the University, Mr. Jagai, Mrs. Hassan Ali, High Commissioner for India in Trinidad and Tobago, professors, members of the media, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to welcome all of you here to this part of the university, and to welcome you especially to the Academy of Arts, Letters, Culture, and Public Affairs. Many persons are not aware of the work of the Academy, and permit me to spend a minute or two to tell you about this Academy, founded in 2005 as it were the outreach of the university. When the university started, many persons see the university as hallowed halls where people sit down and listen to lectures. But the framers of the university thought that we have to have a body that can reach out to the community through lectures, forums, etc. And so here we are. We always reach out to the community, talking to them, receiving lectures, from giving them lectures and receiving all their goodies, etc., and bringing to the university all the cultural aspects outside, especially the hidden cultures. So we are well known for that. And we have, over the years, promoted all our graduate students, giving lectures and showing you all their work. Tonight is a special night because we have a PhD student now giving you the benefits of his work. As part of the university, what we do here, because of the resources at the Academy, we have been supervising a number of these students from time to time, many of them. At present, would you believe, ladies and gentlemen, at present we have 7 such persons reading for their PhDs supervised by the Academy. I think that deserves a round of applause. We also have 14 students reading for their master's degree in Carnival Studies, and we hope by the end of the year that these will graduate and move on, as it were, to their PhDs. I am very, very proud to be here tonight, especially because this graduate student, Mr. Balkaran Singh, I don't want to take the wind out of Dr. Samaru's sail, but this graduate tonight worked very assiduously with the Academy. And there was a time when many persons were writing and saying that the standards of the Academy were dropping and that we were not producing good students. And tonight you will see for yourself the standard of Mr. Balkaran Singh, and you will see, as it were, the standard of the university. So a warm welcome again to all of you tonight. Thank you for coming out, and we hope that we'll have a beautiful evening. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Samau. Mr. Jagai has just left, but I would still acknowledge his presence here. Professor Hollis, Liverpool. Professor Samau, Your Excellency, the High Commissioner for India, Mr. Mali Mishra, Mr. Bharadwaj, First Secretary to the Indian High Commission, Mrs. Hassan Ali, former First Lady, Bernard Gopi Singh, Envoy, Mr. Maharaj of the UTT, members of the media, fellow artists who are here, ladies and gentlemen. I want to acknowledge 2 other people who have made it very possible to be here this evening. My friend, Mr. Ashwani Parasha from Delhi, who supported me significantly while I was in India, and Dr. Professor Pat Balkan from City University, who flew in yesterday to be with us. Welcome and thanks for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1975, he was not then, but he became Nobel laureate, Vidyanai Paul, our Vidyanai Paul, at a conference at the University of the West Indies, he indicated in his address that people in Trinidad and Tobago and many of the Indian diaspora, they don't know about Indian things. They have a fleeting knowledge. So there is a lack of knowledge from without and a lack of knowledge from within in understanding the Indian and where the Indian is and who the Indian is, and how he or she has come, and therefore where they are today. Not very much has changed since then. There's a lot of talk, but in-depth studies, not much of it has been done. And it was my intention, therefore, as Professor Samaru indicated, to do some research. And the last thing on my mind was to do a PhD. As a matter of fact, when I left the government service and Professor Samaru spoke to me, I said, "No, Prof, I'm not interested in a PhD, I'm doing research." And of course, it took him a few months to influence me into going in this direction. That's how I have done the research from a different perspective for publication. Trinidad space speaking through Indo-Caribbean, through Indo-Trinidadian rituals and festivals. It is 1990 to 2009. It took me 3 years of fieldwork, 6 months of final writing up, which was about 4 or 5 drafts, delivery, 18 months to finally be evaluated and approved. Next slide. Why I took this research is because of who we are, the mosaic of cultures and people that we are. And we do have a heritage, and it has come from various parts of the world. Reflected in our population statistics, in our demography, in our philosophy, social and economic, religious landscape, and our artistic expressions, people of Indian origin have influenced this culture. But what exactly has been their influence? We say we're influencing it. There's a plethora of statements. But what exactly have we really influenced? Or have we influenced very much? What is the current role and function in their continuing, that's the Indo-Trinidadians, they're continuing to shape this dynamic syncretic culture? And when I speak about Indo-Trinidadians, there's always a big conflict. Are we Indians? Are we Indians in Trinidad? Are we East Indian, West Indian? Are we West Indians? Are we Trini Indians? What are we? We have continued a confusion, a foolish confusion set up by Christopher Columbus when he went west to find the East, and he really thought he had reached the East. So it was West Indies. And since then, we can't seem to understand who we are. Right? My aim was just to determine or to throw some light on it. Next slide. From 1845 to 1918, East Indians came to Trinidad. And you have the breakdown on how they came. But a very significant aspect of it was 1857, 1856. The British exiled the last Nawab, Wajid Ali Shah, from Lucknow. 1857, which the British call the Indian Mutiny, which the Indians call the First War of Independence. There were lots of Indians who fought against the British. And they were running away from India. That's what my research has found. Many of them were running away because the English were using all kinds of terror tactics to get rid of them. Right? Delhi was one area in which almost 250,000 Indians were either murdered or slaughtered during 2-3 years after that, during that period and after. So this gives you can see the breakdown on after 1857, what was happening. Indian arrival to the Caribbean, next slide. From 1838, when Indians came to Guyana, to 1918, really, 429,000 Indians came to the Caribbean, which included Suriname and British Guyana then. Next slide. Culture and identity. How has the Indian been portrayed? And how has she represented herself or himself to the local and international observer in the cultural mix? Today, of course, you're aware we have 1.3 million, and 40% of that is of Indian origin. 20% of that are what we call local terminology, Douglas. The rest is broken up in people of African origin, 39-40%, and other peoples. So where is the Indian in all of this? And therefore, what is the culture? And when I am talking about culture, I think it's so very critical that we understand what culture is. Music and dance is not the culture. Limbo and calypso is not the culture. Pan is not the culture. It is aspects of the performing arts. Because in the culture we have the creative arts, the performing arts, the literary arts, the culinary arts. Right? We have a significant amount of arts. And then we have our heritage, our built heritage, our natural heritage. All that constitute culture. It's a value, a norm, a behavioral pattern, our attitude to God, our attitude to work, our attitude to saving and investment, our attitude to family. That is what our culture is. And therefore, when I'm dealing with this topic, this is my definition. This is a UNESCO's definition of culture. Right. Culture, next slide. Indentureship, the Indian arrival, has been researched from many perspectives. From the historical perspective, and I don't need to go into that, Professor Samaru and Professor Liverpool and many people have dealt with it. Geographic. There's a sociological aspect, right? We fill in the gaps now in what has been done, and therefore, what was I supposed to do after I have looked at all of this? So, I saw the sociological side of it. There was a mobility issue side, the performing arts side, the changes, the survival issues, hybridization, and these are people who have written on it. Some rituals and festivals. These are some of the writings. Next slide. We continue to fill the gaps. Hussain, Kelvin Singh, Ken Parmasad, Frank Coram, Blenheim. These are some of the people who have written on the Hussain. In India, there have been many writers. Many of them have written in the regional languages. Not many have written in English, or not many of the works have been translated. So when I went through, I spent basically 2 7-month period in India. Right? 2006 to 2007, and then 2008 to 2009, going through the various libraries, meeting the people. I found that a lot of the literature that I was looking for was not there. Some of the librarians in some of the universities looked at me, particularly in Patna. I remember this one. And the librarian smiled and he said, "Where are you from?" "Trinidad." He said, and you want information on what is taking place in rituals and festivals? In Bihar, we don't have that in our library. We don't have that in the university. You want to come and do something on Indology or something, or history and architecture, we have it. So really, as Professor Samaru has indicated, I had to fill the gap. So therefore, I had to go to English writers who are outsiders. And therefore, we're going to deal with the perspectives. You have two perspectives. You have an outsider perspective who sees something from an outsider's point of view. They don't understand the phenomenology. They don't understand the cosmology. They don't understand the essence of it. And therefore, what you read is not what may be there. Right? But fill in the gap still. Next slide. So there was not very much insider. Somebody who knew, understood, and can write or deliver. The comparative analysis, I searched all over to see where there were comparative analyses of India and any of the diasporic countries through which Indians had gone so that you can compare. I couldn't find much of it or much substantive work. Then the study. What is the study? This is the crux of the study, really. It's a research and documentation in a comparative way of the changing dynamics of some of the major rituals and festivals brought from India by migrants and transplanted onto this landscape. Existing ones in Trinidad, influenced by their presence, plus the symbolism of the flag. Many Indians come here and they look at our Jhandis and they said, we don't have that in India. Where have you got that from? So it was critical, with the advice of Professor Samaru, that you have to write on that. So a chapter has been devoted to the Jhandi. Right? And then I compare that with those rituals and festivals in the areas from which Indians came. So I didn't just go to the city, or just find a place. But where they came from, I went back into those areas and stayed and studied while the festivals and the rituals were taking place. The study, again, I didn't see anything in terms of contemporary work. So it was 1990 to 2009, the turn of the 21st century. And I use a baseline of 1900. So I thought in terms of statistics and analysis, I have 100-year turn of the 20th century and the turn of the 21st century. Next slide. The objectives of the study. Investigate and document the nature and the purpose of the observances. The aim is to illuminate, to demystify. There are many of us who want to keep it shrouded in mystery. So you have to go back to them to understand it. I felt we need it. Everybody must be able to read it. And not only read it, but be able to quote from it. So I made sure there were the relevant quotes that we can get. So we have just demystified the thing. Explain it from a scientific way, right? And explain the links which exist between the event and the ancestral environment. And present the findings, of course, logical, scientific, and in a comprehensive manner. Next slide. The specific objectives of the study, how they have been used in establishing, we talk about space, Your Excellency. I'm dealing with space from a physical side, from an intellectual side, from a spiritual side, space. And I'm dealing with how we identified with it. And present the findings, right, so that Indians in Trinidad, in India and in the diaspora can understand what possibly is taking place with them over there, in their diaspora. And how our diaspora, Trinidad has its own diaspora now. Our people have gone to USA and they've gone to Canada and they've gone to England and they've gone to Holland. How can they understand the link and the continuity? Of course, being a planner myself, or for most of my life, how we can use this for planning. And yes, Your Excellency, 2010 is critical. 2010 was critical. I hope it is critical in terms of using it for changing our environment. Right? And I'm not dealing only with the Indian aspect, but across the board, so that we understand and we can identify as a people. Scope of this study: identify, document the observances and the celebrations. Now, I used each ritual and festival. I observed it, analyzed it, and wrote about it from the point of form, format, fate, food, festivity, the music, the dance form in it, the gender relations, how they are changing, right? Role play and other appropriate categories. Of course, I use economic issues also. Next one. I took 8 rituals, and these were already very big. Rituals, observances, festivals. 3 were festive, 3 ritualistic, and 1 ritual commemorative. We may not have considered them when we go down in the past, but this is how I've categorized it. Hindu, I took Ram Lila, Diwali, Shivratri, and Pagua or Holi. I thought these were representatives of the Hindu aspect. Then, Christianity. What have we influenced here? We didn't bring Christmas, we didn't bring Carnival, but certainly Christians came to Trinidad. And therefore, they had that influence. But as I go along, we'll deal with that aspect of it. And then Islam, Muharram or Hussein. And then the flag or the Jhandi. Next slide. This was my research methodology. It was multidisciplinary. So I dealt with it from an anthropological side, society and the changes, history, the antecedents of the people. I dealt with it from a sociological point of view, cosmology. We tend not to deal with cosmology, but the creation of the universe and how it influences our thinking process. Phenomenology, how we change our senses, how we see things and how we perceive them. The arts. Next slide. I use the arts, I use religion and spirituality. These are the definitions of when I dealt with religion. That's how I dealt with it. Economics. Economics is really how we use scarce resources. And therefore, how in the rituals and festivals we were using this scarce resources. And science. The use of technology and innovation in the development of the rituals and festivals. Next one. Survey in literature. Data collected in both environments, the identification period, mobility issues, economic issues, anthropological issues. In India, it was the same. I use a lot of data, English, and then in UK, English data. British Library. Next one. Quantitative and qualitative data. The survey, Again, archival literature, oral tradition, participatory approach. Next slide. The methodology used, defining all the concepts, what is a ritual, what is a vrat, we say we're fasting. What are we doing? It's a vowful fasting, and therefore how it goes into a festival. It was a ritual first, it continued, historically it went on, right? And then society added on economics to it, and a sociological point. And then you start to celebrate it, and it becomes a festival. Of course, I looked at the performative aspects and the role of text and context. The interesting thing in text, things are related to you and they give you a text and they say, that is it. But what is happening now when you live it from day to day? You add your own context. You go to Ram Lila and suddenly they're saying, well, Ravan is fighting Ram. And Ravan is the evil one. And Ram is the good one. But the context suddenly becomes, our Prime Minister is like Ravan. So you add it in context. And how that is influenced. Right? And it has nothing to do with the race or the gender of the Prime Minister. You're using that analogy. Next slide. Selecting space and place. Space speaks. Place expresses. But one can only understand that message if he has the skill to perceive the unique quality of the specific culture, in addition to interpreting the perceived in a manner. So place conveys energy and conjures up the emotions of its identity contained in its tradition. And this is by a German, Warengusko Pyong. Selecting space and place. Therefore, how did I select the space and the place? You select a space when it reveals itself to you. Right? So you don't go look at it and say, I'll take this one, I'll take that one, I'll take that one. And therefore, sometimes the energies, right, of the space, those who are involved in anthropology would know that you go to a space and it's a power space. You feel the energies and therefore you develop it. Or you go to a space and it doesn't give you any energy really. And therefore you move on. Especially those who are dealing from UTT in our First Peoples. They are identifying the power spots of the First Peoples in Trinidad. San Fernando Hill. It's a power spot. And that I use that. How to select a space and place from where our ancestry came. Next one. So I selected Ram Lila. First Felicity Ram Lila. It's about 100 years old. And I went back. Next slide. Faizabad. Faizabad, we have a Faizabad here. Ayodhya. I went back to Ayodhya, where Sri Ram, the hero of the Ramayana, of the epic of the Rama story. There are 300 stories of Rama. Right? So I went back to Ayodhya and I compared it. Diwali, I took Trinidad and I took a place on the border of Uttar Pradesh, where most of our ancestry came, and Madhya Pradesh, the Banda region, Jhansi region, Gwalior, Indians came from that region. But that is Madhya Pradesh, and that is not a Bhojpur culture. We tend all the time to say we have come from a Bhojpur culture, only a Bhojpur, the Bhojpur region. But when I looked at the breakdown of people, where they came from, I've identified the areas I took and what culture it was. Then Christmas, Chennai, of course, the first boats came from Madras. Right? Chennai, and then that's a Dravidian culture. Shivratri, right. Bhojpur, Carnival, of course. Indians didn't come from Goa. But this was, I use Goa because Indians influenced Carnival. There's been a significant amount of Trinidad Carnival Indian influenced, and I'll deal with that in the Carnival side. And therefore, I had to compare it with something. Goa, right? Roman Catholic. Pagua, Trinidad, Vrindavan, Mathura. Last year, I attended a 7-night puja, worship. Somebody had died, and I went. And a chap was singing Biraha, and he was singing it in Brij Bhasha, not in Bhojpuri. And he said, my ancestry is from Mathura, Vrindavan. Now, those of us who do not know the dialects and language, we lump it into Bhojpur. It wasn't Bhojpuri. Jhandi flags, of course, I traversed the landscape. UP, Bihar, Jharkhand was a part of Bihar. Jamshedpur, that's Bhojpur culture. Next slide. Interviewed 78 people, used lots of material. Right. Audiovisual. Next slide. The Ram Lila was Felicity. St. James and Cedras was Hussey. Next slide. Now, these are the areas in India where I went, based on the areas in India from where the Indians, our ancestry, came. It's kind of hard to identify. Delhi, of course. Then I went to Uttar Pradesh. There's the area, the Lucknow area. Lucknow was the capital, and it still is, was the capital of Awadh, 1856, 1857. Incidentally, when I dealt with Carnival, I dealt with chutney, because it seems to be Sukha chutney now in the mass. And 1875, Halim Sharar wrote on the people who are doing Chatak music and dance, 1875. Right? Last phase of an Oriental culture. Back into Lucknow. Varanasi. Then I went into Bihar and Patna for the Jhandis. Jharkhand. Goa for the Carnival. And then Chennai. It's an area. Right? So you have an idea of the areas traversed. Next slide. Right. It was really difficult. I shouldn't say difficult. Very interesting, right, and taxing to have to deal with languages that came to Trinidad, dialects that came to Trinidad and still exist. And these were the areas, when I went into those areas, these were the dialects and the languages that I had to deal with. Of course, the ubiquitous English and Hindi served one in good stead. Plus, not only the English and the Hindi, but the letter that came from the government of India, from ICCR, you presented that letter, which was given to me when I arrived in Delhi, and it opened doors. It opened doors. So that's how I was able to get people to interpret, to talk myself and things like this. Next slide. The presentation, the book actually, the thesis, right? 8 chapters. The first one is how I approached it, the history, the geography, the areas from where I went, the history, the geography, the demographics, that's the population, 1900 and 1990, 2000. Those are the population statistics I got. Then the chapters, how I dealt with them. And then the summary of findings and the conclusion. presentational format. Next one. Endnotes. The 20 tables, 3 diagrams, 6 maps, and a bibliography. The presentation was exactly the same, 500 pages. Next one. Ram Lila. We're now going into Ram Lila. In a nutshell, it's held in the month of Kartik, September, October. Is a great poem. The Ramayana is a great poem. It's called a Mahakavya, classified as Itihas, which really is history. It has a lot of legend, moral stories. It's told in epic proportions. And epic proportions is 24,000 verses. Right? It deals with gods and goddesses and mortals and human beings and story interwoven into story, overlapping, right? But the hero always wins. That's an epic. So, the Ramayana. And I took the first Felicity. I was dealing with 2 sides. There are 2 kinds of Ram Lila. The theatrical village theatre of Ram Lila, the munch or stage part of it, and the savannah, Maidan. And I was dealing with savannah because our Ram Leelas are still very savannah. And the one I took is first Felicity, which is a savannah. So I took that one. And what I found extremely interesting in Ram Leela in Trinidad, I'll deal with the Ayodhya one first. The entire cast pray in the mandir, which we used to do before the performance, and they start 8 o'clock in the night. The swarups, these are not the actors. The people who play the parts, they are transformed. And you are playing Ram. You're not playing in the context phenomenology again. You're not playing, but you are Ram. Right? That's a swarup. An actor would be a patra. You're a vessel, and the role comes into you, and you do it. But when you play Ram, you are Ram. Right? It is the play, the Lila. Lila means play. The play of Ram. So, they don't walk. Right? The Pandit reads, he prompts, and they deliver their dialogue. On the last night, Ram returns from Lanka, performs travel around the town. On the last day, he goes into the river Sarayu. He disappears, and he comes back out as the normal young man for the rest of the year. So the play ends. The Ram, right, the embodiment of Ram in the Ram Lila has ended, and he's now a normal person again. These are the swarups, or the players, Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, Shatrughan, in the Ram Janki Mandir in Sahabganj, between Faizabad and Ayodhya. Next slide. Very interesting. When I went the second day, this old lady was doing the makeup. She was using vegetable dyes on all of them. And this young person was playing Ram, her grandson. Next to her is her son, who had already done Ram before. And she herself had been a Ram when she was young. But what was extremely interesting about this is when I asked her to film, right? And she said, sure. Hanji, aaiye. And then I asked her, ye kya hai? What is this? She said, ye dye hai, vegetable dye. And she asked me, where are you from? Kidhar se aaya? I said, I'm from Trinidad. She says, oh, I know. I asked, do you know Trinidad? She says, I know Trinidad. And she proceeded to tell me a very interesting thing. Her grandfather was born in Trinidad. Bhagwan Singh. Bhagwan Singh came from India as an indentured to Trinidad. He had 9 daughters and 2 sons. One of the sons was Mangal Singh, her grandfather. The grandfather took the 2 sons back, left the 9 daughters here, went back to Patna. And Mangal Singh came and resuscitated the Ram Lila in Sahabganj. And it has been running for 125 years. And she has been trying to find her family in Trinidad. I've been trying to find them too, but I couldn't. But they're somewhere around. So this is Vimla Singh. Amazing. And she said, I want to meet them. I don't want to come to your country to live. We're very well here. We're very comfortable and satisfied, of course. They were industrialists. But I want to meet. That's the first linkages. Next one. Then the Ram Lila of Trinidad. Of course, there are changes. They walk. They do the Aarti on the Maidan. Pandit chants, interprets, and the miming is done. Ram returns and the performers, and then he becomes normal after that. Next slide. This is Felicity. Next slide. This is our Swarups, our gods in first Felicity Ram Lila. You saw their gods, these are our gods. Diwali. So I went off to Chitrakoot. Chitrakoot, for those who don't know, Ram spent 11 years in Chitrakoot. He was advised to stay there. And Bharat, his brother, came to Chitrakoot to convince him to come back on the throne. And he says, no, you take. And then the brother took his chappal, his karao, and went back. So I went to Chitrakoot and I was told this is a power spot because it is. The interesting thing about Chitrakoot is about 30 or 40,000 people. And during the period of the Diwali, it grows to approximately 100,000 people. In that 5 days, they come to the river Mandakini. They come to go around that Bharat Milap temple. Right? So, Diwali in Chitrakoot has nothing to do with Ganesha and Lakshmi and Saraswati. It has to do with Ram, like Trinidadians have been saying, Ram. Diwali is the Ram part of it. And people go on Tirth, they go on pilgrimages. So they go to all the pilgrimage spots where Ram and Sita used to be, Spatik Sheila, then they go to Hanuman Dhara, and they go to various places. Let's go. Diwali is 5 days. Right. The first day, commercial area. Commercial. Next one. These are people who just come. These are the pilgrims. There's no place to stay. So they line the streets. I took the shot. These were people who were cooking on the banks of the Mandakini River. Oblivious to what was happening. They had come for Tirth. They had come for pilgrimage. Right. Next shot. Kamadgiri, Ram, Bharat. I've explained that to you already. What I found interesting too is pilgrims, they perform vrats around the circumference of the hill, but they do Mool Kundan. Mool Kundan is shaving of baby's first hair. And they sing these songs, just what I remember as a little child, used to be sung. And which may be still sung, but they used to be sung at the Sopari Mai festival in Siparia, when they went to do Mool Kundan. This has been done at Diwali in Chitrakoot. Same songs. Next one. And then the evening Jamdia. That's on the second day. Right. Diwali in Trinidad. This is the third day now. Right. In Trinidad, we really have 2 days. The second day, which is the Jhandi, where you light one day to Yamaraj, Lord of the underworld, the netherworld. We don't really say hell. It's not hell. It's another aspect, right, of existence, the netherworld. And therefore, Jhandi, I saw it in Chitrakoot, and then Diwali day, which is the major day. This is Trinidad here. Can't see much of it. Next slide. The fourth day, we don't celebrate it here, but we talk about it all the time. All the pundits talk about it. Panditji, you would. But not within, overall, within the Diwali perspective. It is really an agrarian festival. Right? Govardhan Puja. You would go normally to pujas, and on a Thursday, 5-night or 7-night Ramayana, and the Thursday night is always the Govardhan Puja, right? It is a ritual where those who remember Krishna lifted the mountain Govardhan with a finger, right, to save the people who were being flooded by a deluge by Indra. That's a big story. But this is the Govardhan. They make it, they put some cotton wool on it to signify animals, they light the diyas around it, and then 2 weeks after they take it and they scatter this in the fields because it has been energized, it's consecrated. So this is in Chitrakoot. Next one. Christianity and Christmas. Why Christianity? Not many of us are aware that Doubting Thomas, Judas Thomas, that was his name, went to India in 50 AD and died in South India in 72 AD. And there's a huge basilica, the third largest in the world. He was buried under the basilica. Next slide. Next slide. This is the basilica, St. Thomas Basilica in Chennai. And I was invited by the Archbishop of the Chennai for Christmas Day service. The Christmas slide. The service, Christmas, is just like ours. The trees, the lights, the holly, the mistletoe. Right. And the services are in 3 languages: Tamil, Malayalam, and English. The attire is eclectic. People came with saris. People came with lungis, the sarong tied around you. They came with kurta pajama. They came with fully suited and booted. And the ladies wore frocks. That's how they're called there. They were frocks. And it was very interesting, eclectic. Next slide. What is really interesting, in Trinidad, the music and the dance, we have carols, we have classics and steel. Right. We've got parang, and we have dance. In India, they've got carols in 3 languages. But they have a classical music, it's called Margazi. The 1 month from mid-December to mid-January. And people came from all over the world. Indian classical music, South Indian, but North Indians came. Carnatic music, and they brought North Indian Hindustani music. And it's not only music, it's dance, it's film, it's talk. You have over 300 concerts in that 1 month. Right? And it starts 9 in the morning and it goes till 12:1 in various places. And that was very interesting. Next one. Then we went to Shivratri. Shivratri, the night consecrated to Shiva. Right? It's the 14th day of the dark fortnight of the lunar month of Phalgun, February, March. Right? Shiva, the sublime state of Godhead, is represented in the form of a lingam, a Shiva lingam. When I started to talk, people were not aware of what the lingam was. And one person, a Trinidadian, she actually told me, oh gosh, I'm not going back to Shivratri. I didn't know that was what the lingam was. And I said, what you don't understand? It's a fertility concept, right? And therefore, this is what you're praying to. You're not praying to a physical, right, lingam. You're praying, it is creativity. Creativity, intellectual creativity, artistic creativity, spiritual creativity, religious procreation, and physical procreation. So different people go to pray to Shiva for different things. Right? He's Mahadev, Lord of the universe, in any case. Right? Those are the attributes. And really it is a blunder to talk or think of Shiva only as a phallic symbol. And Shivratri is only phallus. It is much, much more. Shivratri in Banaras. Next one. People descend on Banaras in hundreds of thousands. And I think the light is too bright. That's why we can't see the photographs. Yeah, if we could pull this down. But this person is called a Digambar Sadhu. What we refer to as naked sadhus. Digambar, they are clothed by the air. They only wear ash. And this was winter. Right? All of us were wearing winter clothing. And he had come. Right. Now I can't see mine. Yeah. I'll take this out. Right. And he had come and, of course, he was praying. But on the night before Shivratri, on the banks of the Ganges, there was an arti being done, a beautiful arti. And I would recommend anybody who wants to do a pilgrimage or just go to India, go for Shivratri and see this arti on the Ganga. It is awe-inspiring, really. It lasts about an hour. And within half an hour of being in it, everybody was so emotional. They were crying. There was live music, and these people were performing the arti along the banks of the river. There were about 7 of the young priests. Next slide. This is Shivratri morning on the Ganges. They are selling you all the ingredients you need for the doing the puja. You buy it. You offer it right to the water right there. It floats down the water. They collect it down the next side and they come back and they sell it to you. Right? And that's India. It's commercial. But it has to deal with your faith. It has to deal with your, the phenomenology, what you see and what you perceive and how you feel it. Right? And it's really interesting. And you can get for 5 rupees, you can get for 100 rupees, you can get for 500 rupees, depending on what you want. Right? And the next person would buy it back and deliver. So that's how we have it. And people bathe and then they throw their jal and then they go in the temples. Next slide. Carnival. From Shivratri is into Goa. Because those of you who are aware, the day after Shivratri or during Shivratri is Carnival. These are fertility rituals. Carnival is it's a pagan, and I'm using pagan here, meaning folk. Right? Pagan means nothing else but folk. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official language of Rome. 325 AD. It wasn't before that. But the carnival was there. Dionysus, Bacchus. These were the fertility goddess and goddess of Carnival. And therefore, Carnival is exactly the same as Shivratri. But we are looking at it from a different concept. And therefore, it's a fertility ritual. So in Trinidad, whether we know it or we don't know it, we recognize it, we want to accept it or not, there is going to be fertility. We can control it. The Hindus are controlling it. They go, they pray, they offer the water, right? They sing, and therefore they appeal to the higher sides of our being. The non-Indians, or the Indians who leave it and go into the carnival, then deal with it at the lower levels, and therefore we can't stop the whining. We won't, The music is going to hit us, because the music is percussion. And percussions are going to hit us down here. The vibrations that come out of percussion instruments hit you at the lower level. And when you eat the meat, all the food is calibrated. The meat is at the lowest level, so it's going to hit you down. And when you use the alcohol, you cut off the senses of thinking. So you're now totally in the fertility ritual. Right? And, but the carnival came in 1783. It arrived in Goa in 1510, and I needed to see how it looked like and what they have influenced. Next slide. In Trinidad, the carnival is on foot, wheels, recent vintage. 1958 was the first pan on wheels. Kim Johnson, he may have left. He has documented that. 1964, it was the first major band parade in streets in Goa. Before that, it used to be just like Trinidad. On trucks and in cars and things like this, they used to go around. Roman Catholic, main festivals are the same. From planning, it takes 9 to 12 months in Trinidad. It takes 6 to 8 weeks in Goa. Here you pay to perform. There you perform, right? They beg you to come and perform. The only people they pay there is the people who do the music. Like on our streets here, the music is live. Next one. Now this is Trinidad, and I was dealing with Indian influence in the carnival. I'm not dealing with the carnival, I'm dealing with Indian influence in the carnival. Jab jab, burukit, some calendar, because people move from the Hussey, Gatka into beat in calendar, right? And limbo. So this is a jab band. I think I took this in 2008 on the Greens, Piccadilly Greens. Next one. Goa, the music, the live music is Portuguese, is Konkani, Hindi. When we arrived in Goa, Dr. Belkon, who is chairman of International Carnival Conference of City University in New York, and we've presented a lot of papers at conferences before. I indicated to her, I am going to be in Goa, and she said, I'm coming to Goa. She arrived the day before. When we arrived and we hit the streets, they were playing Don't Stop the Carnival. And we asked, where has this come from? They know it was Calypso, but they didn't know where it came from. It didn't matter. It was the mass that was important. So, brass band. Next slide. This is Goa. See the brass? On the streets. Carnival, there is 4 days of mass. Valdez, Mapsa, Panjim, Margao. Right. Next. We needed to go for Ash Wednesday for ashes. In Trinidad, we went for ashes, so we went to Goa for ashes. Dr. Belcon is there. But we went to a particular church, the cathedral where the mortal remains of St. Francis Xavier lies. We saw the body. The body is there for everybody to see. St. Francis Xavier's body is still there. And hundreds of people were coming in. The church was full, but there was a constant movement. There were lots of foreigners, tourists. An interesting thing which I found, our carnival, how much tourists we get? 40, 50,000 for carnival. And for the season, we get 300,000. Goa, for the season, the winter season, 2 million tourists. Right. So consider the carnival period, how much they would have got. 2 million tourists. Goa is the size of Trinidad, the population the size of Trinidad. Goa is on the same latitude as Barbados. Sorry, I'm talking economics now and development. But really, we need to see things from different perspectives. So here we had met the old Mazignia, and he talked to us, we interviewed him on Carnival in Goa. The interesting thing about him, when the carnival is good, right, the Roman Catholics say, yes, it's ours, we bought it. And when the issues were bad and the newspapers were knocking it, they were saying, no. Carnival has nothing to do with Roman Catholicism. It is Christianity, that's a pagan festival. So, next slide. This is Carnival in Trinidad. This is Blue Devils. But what I found rather interesting, see the smoke, the flambeau? The same flambeau I found in Hussein in Lucknow. There are two Muslim groupings major, the Shiite and the Sunnis. The Shias, we'll deal with that. But the Sunni, they were blowing fire the same way on the streets, beating the drums, playing the gatka. A lot of us have lost the art, the gatka, which is fencing, right? Mock combat of the story of Hussein at Karbala. And I found this in the Ram Lila also in Sahabganj. When the battles begin between Ram and Ravan and Hanuman and Kumkaran were being waged, they were blowing fire through the flambeau. And the Pandit was saying, these were the rockets that were crossing in the battle, across the stage and across the country in Lanka. So it's in the Carnival, and it's in the Hussein, and here it's in Ramlila. Next one. Pagua, Holi. It's a spring festival again. It's a post-harvest festival. It's a fertility ritual because it's spring. Everything is blossoming. And therefore, there are lots of legends. In Trinidad, the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha has 5 days of it, but it is spread out. And I found that there's Chautal and Chautal and Chautal and Chautal. We have lost a lot of it because many of our ancestry came from Mathura and Vrindavan. We have not developed it at all, right? Chautal is a method of presentation of folk music, right? And they sing equally about Ram, the theme, and about Krishna. There is the burning of Holika. There's a whole legend associated with it. The Hindu Prachar, Kendra has introduced. The Pichkari. The Pichkari are the guns where you have the abir, the colored water that you squirt other people with, and other venues. Next slide. But in Vrindavan, 5 days, you had gulal. Gulal is the dry powder where people were actually taking license and rubbing it hard and all over the bodies of anybody they met. It's the only place I saw so much, and time I saw so much license. But then, of course, it's spring. It is ritual. It is regeneration. And therefore, you have to use intoxicant. Here we use the rum. There, every single person was heavy and high on marijuana. Bhang is called bhang. You grind the marijuana, you boil it with almonds and raisins and things like this, and you drink it. It's called thandai. It's cold. Or you make it into small golis and you use it. And just everybody, wherever you went, in any shop you bought sweets, there was bhang in it. You bought food, there was bhang in it. People offered you go to somebody's house, there was bhang in it. It is not an item that is illegal and the police run you down. Right? So day one, Gulal and Abir, Banke Bihari. Next slide. This is one of the most famous temples in Vrindavan. Banke Bihari is another name for Lord Krishna. And since that is his area, right? That's where he was. People come to this temple. You see that yellow at the side? I was just able to take a shot as they threw the gulal, the dry powder, and it is rising. You couldn't walk into the temple with any shoes because normally you can't. But you couldn't walk. There was at least quarter to half inch of water on the ground of the temple because they were spraying you and they were rubbing and they were singing. So that's the first day, Banke Bihari. Next one. Now, this is Holika Dahan, the burning of the Holika in a place called Phalen, just outside of Vrindavan, but is on the road back to Delhi, but is in the Vrindavan area. Phalen, we went there to see the burning of the Holika. But in this small area here, there's a panda, a person whose ancestry was every year for 40 days he fasts. And then he goes out on that day. He takes a bath. On the right of this, there's a huge lake, goes into the lake, wets himself, and he runs right across the burning fire. But he has to jump clean across or run through it. Right? At least 50,000 people were there. If you see the other slides, only they had come to see it happen. Right. Now, after this, I got a book by Grousey, who had come and who was an administrator, an Oxonian from Oxford. And Grousey had written 100 years before, 1897, referring to exactly the same thing, word for word, scene for scene. It had taken place 100 years before. So, Holi in Phalen, 2007. Next slide. The next day, it was Ras Lila, the whole story of Krishna in folk ballet. But when Krishna finished and all the people who were there, everybody in the front of the stage where the performance took place, when it finished, everybody jumped into the pool. Kund is well. They threw all the flowers in it, they threw all the abir in it, and everybody jumped into it, and they played Holi in the Kund. This, of course, is a swimming pool, Olympic size. Next one. The last day is called Huranga or Latamar, maybe it may be good for our women folk here. That is the day, the last day, where the women dress up, cover their faces, and they come out on the streets, see, and they beat the men. Men are not supposed to retaliate. You run away, but you are beaten. Really, they beat, right? But you can't see their face. So it is a good psychological and sociological, relaxing from possibly domestic violence and things like this. Was quite interesting. Next slide. Muharram. Back to Hussein now. Hussein, I took it from the lunar calendar of Muharram, which is the first month of the Islamic year. The first 10 days is called Muharram. And a number of things took place in that 10 days. The story goes that Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, peace be unto him, they felt that they should have had direct access or ascension to the caliphate. That is the leadership of Islam. And they were denied it. Those who had assumed the leadership on this day in Muharram, there was really an ambush and a massacre. And Hussein was killed. And for the 10 days, Muslims mourn. It has now become a major Shiite thing. But in India, it was Shiite, Sunni, and Hindus. Until 1906, it was equally Shiite and Sunni. 1906, the British gave special privilege to the Sunni, and they started fighting each other. No, this is historical fact. So today in Lucknow, you have I'm dealing here with Trinidad, the 7th night, the 8th night, the 9th night, there are processions. On the 10th, there's a road procession. Many rituals have disappeared in Trinidad. There's the dirges, the singing of the sad songs, the marsias, the gatka. But Banaiti was an integral part of Hussein, where they lit a stick on both sides and they twirled it around, and that was part of the procession. There was a fire pass, Agmatam. Taja building remains a family, community affair. Next one. This is Trinidad, the flag night. Right? This would be called Alam Kirat. The Alams are the flags. Right? But this is St. James on the flag night. And only drums are used here now to tell the story. Whereas in Lucknow, they still sang. Next one. This is in Cedrus, they are going to drown the Hussein. And I'm using the term drown. In Lucknow, they bury the Tajas. Right? The Shiites bury. The Sunnis immerse theirs in water. Right? And in areas where there is water, even the Shiites do it. Next one. This is Trinidad on Ashura. The interesting thing is we've got the moons, and we refer to these as moons. But in India, they're not referred to as moons. They're referred to as sipars. They're breastplates. And we have now brought them into moons, and we dance them. Next slide. The processions, 10 days and 40th day. First night, procession. 6th night, fire pass. 7th night, Mehndi night. Have a flag night, and then Ashura. Well, I've spoken about the rest already. The Shiites, they carry those. The Sunnis take them. They're wheeled. There's no intoxicant the Shiites are involved in a lot of self-flagellation. They beat themselves with chains and things like this. Then, Sunni, as I indicated, there's the gatka, the blowing, the flambeau, ordinary attire, and the Taja construction is a commercial affair. Next slide. This is the first night. 50,000 people are on the streets. Elephants and camels and marching brass bands playing sad music. Next slide. This is the first night, the Taja. This is about 50 feet high. In the middle of the night. It starts at 9, it ends at 1. And they really beat their chest. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. It can be frightening if you're not part of it. But if you're part of it, the energies are tremendous in terms of being part of it. Next one. Here we are all part of it, beating our chests. I'm sure we could recognize some people. On the left is the Nawab of Lucknow, of Shish Mahal, Jafar Mir Abdullah. We were his guests. Then there's an American dancer, John Kirkpatrick, myself, Colonel Naqvi, and my supervisor then, Professor Samaru. Next one. These are the Tajas. You can buy them from 5 rupees to 5,000 rupees. Some are made in silver, some are made with gold and silver. They are not thrown away, but these are thrown away. Next. This is the Mehendi night. The two brothers, daughter of one, son of the other, got married on the 10th day, just before the final battle of Hussein. And as Qasim was married, before the wedding was consecrated, he had to go and fight battle. So he went out and he died, of course. But on this night, the 7th night, they have a Mehendi night, which is a wedding night in memory of what would have happened if he had not died. So you have all these gifts and lights on people's head, and all they do is they sing sad songs, blow their brass bands, right, brass instruments, and they mourn and they howl on the streets. Really, for Qasim. Next. This is the food. It's called Sada Khana. That big roti is called Srimali, and the food is called Tabaruz. We have the same thing in Trinidad, right? Because in the Husseyards, there are no food with alcohol, with meat, right? There's abstinence, zavrat. So exactly the same thing here. Next. Jhandis. The flag is really historic. It's legendary. It's political. It's national. It's a pennant, really, a pataka on a flagpole. That's what it basically is. It may have a crest as well as it may not have a crest on it. And you can find them anywhere. Next slide. These are flags in Trinidad, in Sangre Grande. Next slide. These, well, of course, I went to look. So this was on the way to Chapra in Bihar, from Patna into Chapra, and I found these. And they were in people's yards. They dot the landscape. They were in the agricultural areas. They were in the mandirs. This one is exactly what we have here. At the root of it, you have the tulsi, the basil plant, and there was the little saligram, the stone, just as we would have it here. the concept of the Jhandi, the axis mundi, the navel of the universe. So the Jhandi is a symbol of the navel of the universe, the cosmic pillar, right? It's in various religions. It straddles the three regions, the upper region, our region, and the nether world. And energies are supposed to travel up and down this pillar. And therefore, by installing the flag, you are pulling energies from the upper regions and consecrating and energizing your space. You're claiming your space, but you're energizing it. And therefore, you can maintain direct communication with other cosmic realms. Hence, we have different colors to represent different deities on the flags. Next slide. In Hinduism, the cosmic pillar is called the Skamba, right? And the Atharva Ved deals with it, the axis mundi that stands at the center of the cosmos and supports the entire universe. And I'm quoting from the Atharva Ved. By the support are held both heaven and earth. By the support, the broad domain of space. By the support is the whole world pervaded. So in recreating the physical Skamba in your space, through the Jhandi, you are coming in contact with special deity. So I've dealt with it from the philosophical side, from the cosmology, the creation of the universe, and from the scientific side. Right. Yantras. You have signs, symbols. There are three aspects of it. A mantra, we know what a mantra is. You chant. And then you have a symbol, which is a yantra, which gives you the same energy as the chanting. And then you have tantra, right, which is another aspect of devotion. And therefore, the Jhandi consecrates and energizes the space. It then becomes a yantra in itself. The swastika is a yantra. The cross is a yantra, right? Because they have their own energies. And there is an instrument called the BEM, which calibrates the energy levels of each one of these symbols. And you know what the cross does. The sanctum sanctorum of the church, you can go and you can measure the energy level. You can measure the energy level in the flag. You can measure energy levels in the body when you are praying, when you are not praying. You measure the energy level when you're doing arti and when you're not doing, and the energy levels change. So I dealt with all of that in Jhandis. Right. Next one. What I found in terms of the Jhandis, a significant aspect, there are two aspects of Hinduism. You have a greater Brahmanical Sanskritic tradition where you must find everything in the book. If it's not written in the book, it's not there. The text. But there is a folk tradition which deals with context. You don't need a book for it. I tried very hard, and then I went to a professor of Indology. I gave him my chapter on the flag, and then I was asking him about all of these, and I said, but I didn't see this in the book. He said, Mr. Balkan Singh, why are you looking? You don't understand Hinduism is in context also. And therefore, I went and I started looking at it from the contextual perspective. And then I realized when I went into Chhapra and Jharkhand, many of the people who came from India in the first instance, 1845, 1848, 49, the first set of people were Paharis, hill regions. They didn't come with texts. Right? Then Junglis came. People who lived in the jungles. Well, they were called Junglis because they were not as learned. But they came from those regions. And they brought flags, they brought Jhandis. Now, when we start assimilating and we start politicizing and bringing Hinduism into one big body, Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha, the formation of it was bringing all these disparate bodies into one. And therefore, your flags have become an integral part. And you have forgotten that there is a contextual side of people didn't need a text to put up a Jhandi. Right? So, I looked at it from that perspective. Jhandi on the beach for Kartik Nahan, Manzanilla. Next one. Now I'm going into findings. Again, as I spoke, there are a number of writings, but in Trinidad not much has been done on rituals and festivals. That which we have got are written by outsiders. And therefore we have to take from them. And they are not dealing with the essence, they're dealing with what they've seen. And therefore they give you a different perspective. And therefore, we needed, the interpretations are different. Also, the traditions I dealt with. Next one. Then, changes in form of the festival format, in the gender relations I found recurrent patterns of light, divinity, fertility, seasons. In doing the research, I found in terms of the fertility, Carnival was exactly, to a great extent, in principle, in essence, the same as Shivratri. A lot of it was the same in Holi or Pagua, but it's how we have dealt with it differently, from different perspective and context. Bountiful harvest, and then use of music in conveying emotions. Ras, a lot of ras. Next one. The role of the lunar cycles. The lunar cycle is significant in Islam, in Hinduism, and therefore everything is on this cycle. I found text and context, I've explained that already. And then the use of the senses to transcend. When you, in Chitrakoot, looking at the river, Mandakini, I looked at it, I was the outsider, but looking at it still, hopefully from the insider's perspective. People were going into the river, a polluted river, dirty, just up the stream, the sewage was coming into the river, but they were bathing and they were drinking the water and offering the water and carrying the water because they had seen spirituality in it, right? And therefore, they were transcending senses, right? When we saw the lighted arti, it wasn't just waving of a flame, but it was an arti to God and divinity you are dealing with. And what I really recognize also, because when using the BEM and the scientific side, you can calibrate it. And then you see when you do arti, this is how much the energy levels in the body go up. So there was a scientific basis. So therefore, what we are referring to art is really significantly high science. We haven't reached that level to say our art has gone high science. And we try in our own way, in a very physical way, to separate art and science. The science and technology in costume design and firecrackers and Diwali, Husay, sound and tape recording. Next one. There were conflicts in the environments. What was religion and what was culture? And that's why I've used the definition of culture as distinct from religion. Religion, faith in God, spirituality, communion with divinity, with the essence of divinity. The conflict. There's the conflict. Are we commemorating like in the Husay, or are we celebrating? It's not a celebration. And we run the risk in Trinidad when we are indigenizing, when we are creolizing it, and we don't know what we are indigenizing and creolizing, we carry wrong messages and we distort the essence of the ritual or the festival. Mind you, I am not saying not to indigenize. I'm not saying not to creolize. But we need to make sure that the people who are going to advise you know what they're talking about. Otherwise, we're going to run into a society where we totally confuse. And when energy levels are let loose and we don't know how to control them, because we are really spiritual beings in a physical body and not a physical body that has a spirit. And therefore, we need to deal with the energy levels of those spirits. Gender issues, the crossing over. There were things that were the preserve of males in the past, and women are fast good. And even the Ram Lila in Trinidad. What I also found interesting, Ram belonged to the warrior caste. Ram is Kshatriya. But in Trinidad, no Kshatriya did those roles. Previously, there were only Brahmins who did it. Right? Even in India, I questioned in the Ram Lila, who is doing this now? Well, Vimla Singh and her descendants are doing it. But prior to that, it was Brahmins. And I asked, why you do? Another thing, Ram, when this took place, the Ram Lila, the Ramayana, and Ram went off, Ram was not a young boy. When you calculate, he might have been in late 20s, after marriage, 8-10 years after. So he didn't go as a young child. But we take the young child all the time for the Swarups, Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, Chatra. Why? The reason I got is that many of them are pre-puberty, so we can worship them. We find reasons to do these things. But you could easily well make Ram a big man in your Ram Lila. Disappearing arts and skewed treatment, significantly skewed treatment of our celebrations and observances. When I looked at funding, and I'm talking about Trinidad, that goes into the Carnival and the millions, and the amount that goes to paying the pan men for the panorama, paying per pan man. And you're looking at the Hussein, and you're looking at the Tassa drummers. Right? You're talking about playing one tune, 10 minutes for panorama. Look at the cost that goes into it, that is given by the state. When you put on that drum on your neck, at 9 in the night, you don't take it off till 2 o'clock in the morning. When you put that drum on in the Hussein, at 10 o'clock in the morning on the Ashura day, on the 10th day, you don't take it off till 6 o'clock. A very short period you take it off. The Tassamen get nothing. They don't even get money to buy new tassas. I have done the economics of it. It's in the book. It takes $24,000 to outfit one tassa side. They don't get any money. They get $5,000 for the Hussey. One Hussey side gets $5,000. So you have 5 in St. James, 25,000. But on our website, our official government website, we are marketing it, the land of Hussein. The same thing with Ram Lila. You're talking about 35 Ram Lila groups in this country. You know, when I looked at it, it has varied from 300,000 with 35 Ram Lila groups to some getting as much as 5,000 over the last 4 years. 5,000 by 35. Skew treatment. You're talking 35, 50 artists, and each Ram Lila gets between 100 to 10,000 people in the 10 days. Multiply that by let's say 30. 300,000 people engaged for Ram Lila. Maybe we could check how many people are engaged in the carnival. Mind you, I'm not saying give that one and don't give this. I'm saying skewed treatment. I'm saying we need to look at it, adjust it. If we need to deal with Trinidad from an egalitarian perspective, if we need to diversify, if we need to say this is a multicultural society and we are promoting that, right? Interconnectedness of the theme, piety, festivity, change. Next one. Conclusion. The Indian in Trinidad. 165 years. Right. Notice, my thesis research ended at 2009. I'm dealing with prior to 2009. What you see on the papers, what they talk about, marginalization, and Indians themselves are only talking about dal belly Indian and drink a rum. So you're portraying yourself as drunkards, right? But there are those who have remained, who have persevered. It doesn't faze the Indian to be a Trini, because once that flag is put down there, whether it is in Hussein or it is in Ramlila or any other thing, he is consecrated. He, she have consecrated that ground. They have energized that ground and it becomes part of your Dharti Mata. And therefore, you are Trinidadian more than anything else. 1962, we all had opportunities because we were under the British and therefore we were British citizens to leave the country and go. 1988, we know about 1988, under NAR, many people were leaving, right, when the economy had gone very. But Indians stayed like everybody else who stayed, right. This thesis is on Indo-Trinidadian, right. We continue to be home. There's cultural persistence. And when I talk about cultural persistence, I am not talking about reacting to marginalization, reacting to skewed treatment. I am talking about persisting in your value and attitude and your behavioral patterns. Continuity. That's what I'm talking about. There's need for private support, public support. But there's another major thing, the last one, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It's a worldview of how the Indian sees himself. I live in a global village, and therefore I can go and come as I want. And if I move into another place, I would consecrate that place, and it will become mine too. And therefore, you can move as well as you can stay. And that is a worldview of an Indian, of Indianness. I'm not dealing with Hindu. I'm dealing with Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs. It's an Indian thing. Next one. What's the recommendation? We all know, we need to diversify the economy. Therefore, we need to go into niche marketing. We therefore need to get out of the ego value system, the gimme approach. We need to brand our festival. We need to brand our rituals. We need to bring people in here for experiences, food experience, Hussein experience, Diwali experience, Ramlila experience. Therefore, we need to have standards. We need to set minimum standards. We need to give them our flavors. And therefore, I'm saying, if we create niche market, we therefore we'll attract researchers, academics, video filmmakers, tourists. Next slide. Positive. I've just made some recommendations here for whoever wants to take it up. Right? It's part of the thesis. Establishment of a course of study in Indo-Trinidadian experiences especially in Hinduism and Islam, a tertiary level, so that we would not be subjected to information which is incorrect. National Commission for Culture. We need to have a policy on culture. And I've seen a lot of things running in the newspaper. Why do we need a policy on multiculturalism? It must be written. We must have a philosophical base. We must have a policy. We must have strategies. We must have programs and projects. And we must have an administrative capability with money put there to implement it for across the board. Not Indian things alone. Across the board. Then implementation of projects. And I've only suggested one, a folk fair for Pagua. Because it is an agrarian festival. And therefore it can accommodate everything. And do workshops. We need to do workshops, folk music, dance. If we had continued our folk dances for Carnival, there would be less possibility of whining. The Carnival people don't know anything else. That's what they see. That's what they're fed. It's like saying, I only know junk food. I don't know anything else. So I'll continue to eat only junk food. And therefore, we need to bring back folk music, folk dances, teach them from the elementary school up, and heritage literature. I have seen things written in books that are in the elementary and high school which are incorrect. Unless we deal with it from the perspective of people who know, we're going to distort issues. These are the acknowledgments, really. The places I went, the libraries I dealt with, the people who helped in Delhi, in Uttar Pradesh, in Madhya Pradesh, in Bihar, in Goa, UK, the British Library, Trinidad and Tobago. Right. Next slide. UTT, right. Professor Ramchand, Mr. Gupta. I did get the first 3 months of the scholarship came from the government of India. I shouldn't say the first 3 months of the scholarship. I got an orientation grant to begin this exercise. That's how I went first. And the previous High Commissioner, your predecessors you have indicated, was instrumental in this. And ICCI, the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, helped me tremendously. Wherever I went, I could have called them, and they provided that support. So this is equally the government of India, as it is the government of Trinidad and Tobago, as it is UTT, as it is the people. And these are the people who supported. Our High Commissioner, Trinidad and Tobago High Commissioner, Pandit Manidev Prasad, and his first secretary, who's now in New York, Urvashi Ramnarayan, Professor Samaru, of course, supervisor, mentor, advisor, guide, friend. There are times when I made statements and he said nothing. For weeks he would say nothing. And then he'll come in a very roundabout way and make a suggestion. And I'll say, yeah. And I'll go back and correct. The Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, they put me up the first time, they put me up the second time. In India, you say, you put up. Actually, I got accommodation. Mr. Suresh Pillai, these are the people at the IGNCA. Right? Professor Belkon, she read the entire chapter on Carnival, made her comments, remarks. Professor Verma, Mr. Parandi, Joachim Telles is like our Peter Minshall of Trinidad. No, sorry. Francisco Martins. But these were the people in Goa. Ashwani, thank you so much for being here. The first time I went, I was recuperating from major heart surgery. 6 months. And I was on the road. And Ashwani took me in hand, provided all the logistics. I would call him from wherever I was and say, I need a ticket to go so-and-so. And the next day it would be there. And I would come back, he'll meet me at the airport. He'll take me, there were days he took me straight from this railway station, straight to the airport and back. These are the people of the St. James who say, Dr. Moliahi helped in the Carnival. These are the pundits who I consulted. Kim Johnson. These are the people who supported while I was writing. Jacqueline Murad, Rauti Badal, Diane Greenleaf, Tyrone Rajana, thank you. Samau Dowlat and others. Next one. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a mouthful. I know it is a mouthful. But your questions. Can you show me this too?
Good evening to everyone.
Maybe we could turn the light on. It's on.
Dr. Balkaran Singh, I'd like to congratulate you for having researched an area which, from an intellectual viewpoint, is virgin territory. And I think by your thesis, you would have made an enormous and seminal contribution to knowledge in Trinidad and Tobago.
Just a minute. Before Farida, I want to acknowledge Farida. Her husband, Sagar Sukraj, helped tremendously in giving me an understanding of the concept of the folk music here. And I dealt with him, in many ways. Farida, thank you. This is Miss. Yes.
Yes, and continuing, I would also like to take the opportunity of claiming a little bit of ownership of you, Professor Balkaran Singh, because Sat was a student of mine at Hillview College, and therefore I'm claiming ownership.
Yes, sir.
But secondly, at Hillview College, he began to also demonstrate all of his dancing skills at that time when he had not actually been to India yet. So I congratulate you, and I am very pleased at the research you have done. But I'd like to pose 2 questions to you, sir. I am having a little difficulty from a conceptual viewpoint in terms of the topic of your research, because I get the impression that geography seems to have a dominant impact in how you conceptualize it. And that as a result of that, what I find is that since this research paper has as its target audience 1 billion Indians, 30 million Indians in the diaspora, and a large international scholarly audience, I find that since you use geography, in terms you talk of a Trinidad space and not a Trinidad and Tobago space, because if you said Trinidad and Tobago space, you would then be introducing the question of nationality. So, sir, because of the target audience that you're actually focusing on, and they all know of Trinidad and Tobago I find that, I don't know, I have not seen your paper, but you need to be able to address, for instance, why is Tobago excluded from ambit of the research paper number 1?
Good.
And number two, there would have been good reasons why this is so. But I felt it needed to be addressed. I also find, that when you conceptualize it, you talk of Trinidad and Indo-Trinidadian, which is the geography aspect of it. But when you came on to do your recommendations and your conclusions, I found it was then that the nationality aspect crept into the discussion. So I would just want to perhaps feel that because of the international audience, that particular issue needs to be addressed. Because as I listen to you, you're telegraphing to me, sir, that this Indian Trinidadian rituals and festival is a Trinidad thing and is not part of the Trinidad and Tobago landscape. So that in this instance, you're saying that I'm making a case that it is part of the cultural mosaic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Understand, yeah.
But as I said, I have not seen the thesis, so I'm sure you must have dealt with it.
Okay.
The second question I'd like to ask you, sir. I see Professor Liverpool, Horace Chalky is in the audience. I think he's head of your... But some time ago, I think early last week, he said that chutney, and that the mother of chutney is calypso. And I know some time ago at Nalis, you had given a lecture on chutney. Do you share the view that calypso is the mother of chutney? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You want to take it?
Sata, I'll say, please never say second time that you are not a historian. Because I think you have done much more than historians would have done in Trinidad, or even in India. Many historians would have done that. You have done much more than that. And particularly, I'm very much impressed because in India in 1992, I was the first historian to talk of applied history. And what here you are talking of is applied history in terms of recommendations and suggestions related to that aspects. One or two minor questions. One is that some of the customs, why they were given up in Trinidad. For example, I see a festival, Tej, in India, which is purely a women's festival. It comes during the rainy season. The women put up swings with ropes over the trees. They wear green bangles. They sing a lot and feast. And their entire poetry during that period is romantic poetry addressed to the lovers who are far away and all. And I was trying, and it's very particular in the region from where people came here, the region of Awadh and the region of Bihar. So why it was given up in Trinidad, and the only explanation I was trying to look at was that maybe here it is raining every time. So, and there it comes after the hot season, so that it was given up here.
Right.
But certain other contradictions, for example, Pagua. Now today the situation in India is in Pagua, that unless you have had a drink, and I tell you, it can be much, much more than the carnival in India, The way it's drinking and then mud throwing and tearing the clothes and whatnot goes into that. And in Varanasi in particular, people may say it's an aberration, but when I try to look into it, it comes that it's a tradition for last hundreds of years. It's a competition for abuses. That there will be groups and they will have the choicest abuses to hurl at each other, at the politicians. They make fun of everyone in that. And that's a big thing, And this Vrindavan thing which you have shown, this Latmar thing, this is taking now different proportions altogether. So what I want to mean here is that the way Carnival, I don't think is any more a ritualistic or a religious or a pagan exercise. It has been taken more over by the commercial interests in terms of marketing out. That what they can earn out of it. What is Valentine's Day? No one had heard earlier, because now you can sell gifts and market things and all put it out. So it's a big thing internationally over. So is happening to some of the festivals in India also in those terms. Whether it is Pagua, whether it is Diwali. Today in India we say, Indians celebrate Diwali, but the real persons benefiting out of Diwali are the Chinese. Because every selling item you are getting in India for Diwali is from China, And so, and even it went on like that, they put Ganesh ji on a horse and then they had to withdraw that idol, because Ganesh doesn't sit on that kind of.
That's it?
No, one last thing, observation. You talked of the recommendations and taking up and things. I want to ask a question. Why is such a wonderful place like Diwali Nagar, where you have so much land and so much opportunity, which can be converted very well into a hub of Indian culture for the entire of Caribbean and be a touristic place for the whole Indian community, not only the Indian community, even the African community, to come and witness that place, why it remains so underutilized and underplanned?
So I shall respond first. Mr. Kangal, thanks for your question and reminded me that I'm still a student. I'll be a perennial student. Why Trinidad? I've dealt with it in a thesis. I have indicated that this thesis is really on Trinidad and Tobago. But since Tobago is basically a homogeneous society, where the period I am dealing with, 1900, and then 1990 to 2009, you don't have much of it, right? People didn't come to Tobago from India. So I'm dealing with the homogeneous side of Tobago and the heterogeneous side of Trinidad. And it is geography, yes, because I had to take it into an environment where I could have dealt with the demography, right? Where the Indians were, what they have been celebrating. And I've dealt with some, Professor Kapil Kumar, I've dealt with some rituals and festivals. I couldn't deal with the whole body of them. There were so many. So I think that answers why I'm not dealing with the Jhula, right? Chait, right? And the others. Calypso, the mother of Chutney, the question you have asked, you have answered it yourself. I gave a lecture, right? And the lecture was much more patronized than this is patronized tonight. And I did give the historical antecedents of Chutney. And I did quote from Halim Sharar, Last Phase of an Oriental Culture, where he was writing in 1875. 1875, there was already Chatak music. Farida has left. But the domes and the dharis are the people who were the entertainers who came to Trinidad, right? Doing Chatak music, Chatak dance. And Chutney today is a compendium of work-related songs, ritualistic songs, wedding songs, film songs that have been converted. The melodic patterns have been taken, right? Changing of the rhythmic patterns, moving from cyclical tal in the Indian music to linear music of Western music. If we want to compete today and say soca is calypso, then we are disproving Ras Chotiai, who begun the whole thing of soca, right? 1973, 76, when he sang Indrani, and he was from Barakpur, and he was influenced, and he said he was influenced by the Indians. Soca is soul and calypso. It wasn't American soul. He may have said, but he didn't say, is American soul. but the rhythm was an Indian rhythm. And therefore, of course, everything. So, my final answer is, when we get statements made which are ill-informed, we could distort our development pattern. And Diwali Nagar, Professor, that belongs to a private organization, which I think you would be best to address that organization. Yes.
I have been listening to the various speakers and contributors very carefully and attentively. I said to myself, what question I should ask? And I came to the conclusion I should not ask any question, but to merely make my presence felt. However, I am Mr. Ramdev Rampat Maharaj. I am the president of the Door Village Ram Lila and Cultural Organization.
Welcome.
And I am accompanied by our public relation officer, Mr. Sudas, who by profession is a certified chartered accountant. And this is certainly a plus for our organization, as a matter of fact for any other organization. However, it is so nice to see what is taking place here tonight. It is so great to see what is happening here tonight. Members of the various cultural fraternity coming together for the upliftment, the development, and the growth of our culture. It must be noted, however, that at the end of last year, 2011, the Door Village Ram Leela Cultural Organization have celebrated or completed 131 years of Ram Leela celebration non-stop.
Yeah.
At the said location, the present administration recognize and realize the contribution we have been making to this aspect of our culture. And in so doing, they have bestowed upon us a national award, Hummingbird Silver, including, you must have read, you must have seen, that the 1992 Nobel Prize winner Derek Walcott spoke highly about Ram Leela. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that a country without a culture is like a ship without a rudder, sailing aimlessly.
I want to congratulate you for your
I want to congratulate you for your contribution and the organizers. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I am being advised that it's really very late. We'll take one more, and because there's some refreshments before everybody leave. So, Ashwini.
Yeah, I am Ashwini Parashar. I have known Sat Narayan from 1972 to evolved Dr. Sat Balkaran Singh in 2011. I had a long association when we were together, students. I also remember when you started and initiated your thesis in New Delhi. I was to an extent associated with you as a friend, and I don't know what other firm I was involved. I noticed one thing. You just went into the roots of the places where Ram Lila or other festivals took place. And you know, India is a country which is divided between rural and urban areas. You haven't tried to compare or analyze the difference between those two sectors. And in your entire research, I have not found your mention even once of any of the major cities. I belong to the city which is New Delhi, and I haven't seen Chitrakoot. In fact, this is news to me what I am seeing here. While in urban areas we feast, you fast during Diwali. This mention is not there. I think you should have taken in consideration of those things. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashwini. This project was intended to deal with the areas from which Trinidad Indians came. Not many of them came from the cities. And as I indicated in the beginning, when I spoke about place and space, the energy levels, finding it, the city has a different kind of energy. As a matter of fact, one commentator on my thesis accused me of just the opposite, of going only into the cities to do the research and not dealing with the areas from which the Indians came. So I am open to these comments and suggestions. Thanks, yes. I would continue to come back into Delhi and feast. But when I deal with the research, I would deal with it from a different perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairperson, Ms. Halar. Acting President of UTT, Mr. Jagai, Professor Liverpool, Chief of the Academy of Arts, Madam Hassan Ali, former First Lady, Professor Samaru, who is in the audience, and I know he was guiding Mr. Balkaran Singh to become Dr. Balkaran Singh, and above all, Dr. Sat Balkaran Singh. All distinguished members of the faculty, provosts, senior members of the academic community of Trinidad and Tobago, distinguished gathering, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I have mixed feelings, first of all, to see this evening come true, because I have had a number of sessions with Dr. Balkaran Singh as he was preparing his paper, his doctoral dissertation. I feel sort of involved, engaged in this matter. One of my distinguished predecessors, Mr. Virendra Gupta, was in a way responsible for Dr. Balkaran Singh's visit to India, where the first phase of his visit, where he started his research into this very, very important and useful work on bringing India and Trinidad and Tobago close in a dimension of rituals and festivals. And there were many others also who helped him along the way. The acting president of UTT made mention of the recent visit of the chairman UTT as part of the delegation of the Honorable Minister Fazal Karim, who also was in turn a part of the Prime Minister's delegation to India. The Prime Minister's state visit has helped both India and Trinidad and Tobago give a relook at our relations. The state of our relations, which were yesterday and the state of our relations, which is today and what is going to be tomorrow. And I think I won't be far from the mark in saying that this could be well a watershed, this particular visit, in our relationship between India and Trinidad and Tobago, for various reasons, but that is not a part of my remarks this evening. Just to say that I have served the diaspora in several roles. As a student of the diaspora, where I was researching in the university on the diaspora. And it so happened that I joined the Ministry of Diaspora, the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs in Government of India, and started formulating policy towards the diaspora. And in that context, had the pleasure of visiting Trinidad and Tobago. 2 years before, I used to actually take office of High Commissioner of India in Trinidad and Tobago, accompanied by my minister that time, who is still the Minister of Overseas Indian Affairs. And later on, it so happened that I was appointed High Commissioner of India in Trinidad and Tobago. So there were 3 distinct phases of my life insofar as my interaction with the diaspora was concerned. This is one work which I was presented this work in a kind of a rough form. And I was told by Dr. Balkaran Singh to go through that and see what were my observations on the text. And it took me a while to go through it, because I feel that it is one of the most in-depth, one of the most pertinent researches which have come out in recent days on the diaspora as such. So I think it'll be a valuable addition to the amount of research you have done so far on the diaspora, and I think it will help the UTT develop its mass, its critical mass, insofar as diaspora-related studies is concerned. However, because this is a subject which carries us over 2 decades, 2000 to 2000, nearly 2010, 1990 to 2010, 2 decades, and a very useful 2 decades of the growth and the evolution of the society, the population in Trinidad and Tobago. I do not know whether you stopped writing before May 2010 or you went on beyond May 2010, because May 2010 is a very significant date in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think a lot of what you have recorded as your observations and even your conclusions could perhaps be again seen in the optic of the May 2010 event. You have definitely provoked the person who reads through this, who goes through this thesis of yours, which is indeed, I would say, a splendid doctoral work which is produced in Trinidad and Tobago. And I say that not only because you have sketched a very useful and most timely portrait of the society of Trinidad and Tobago, seen through the view of rituals, festivals of a particular segment of the population, but also it brings in a way our 2 societies together. And it brings because you have seen that side of what I would say the divide, and then you have seen this side, and you have seen what those rituals and festivals have in a way been transformative for the society, and how it has not only transformed the people in the way, in the dealings, and how they have been able to interact among themselves in bringing out this ethos of a multi-cultural and a plural society in its core. I think this work couldn't have been produced in any other place. That is my observation. This work, at least not in the Caribbean, for sure. But otherwise also, when I make a comparative study between, let's say, a work of similar nature in Mauritius and a work of this manner in Trinidad and Tobago, I think there are some differences, though the societies are more or less similar from a superficial view, but there are differences. And this difference could be made more pertinent through these observations, what you made in this thesis of yours, that it really brings out the flavor or the essence of being a multicultural society. How these rituals and festivals help to empower the society, how they bring the kind of an integration within the society. We are not measuring space here. There is no need to measure space, because that is only a kind of a polemic which we will get into. There is no need of that. But however, since you have titled your thesis as Trinidad Space, speaking through Indo-Trinidadian rituals and festivals, you would always find something missing here and there, lacking something here and there, but there's no need to go into that space aspect as such, but make it as linear as possible and have as kind of as much as a spread as possible, because it is used for academia, for scholarship, for intellectual community more and more, and it will help as a kind of a reference manual for those who are trying to understand diaspora in a multicultural setting as Trinidad and Tobago. So with these words, I thank the UTT for having invited me to this event. There are many more things which we did in India on the university side. You made mention of this MOU which was signed with the Petroleum Institute, a very, very important agreement which was signed between UTT and the Petroleum Institute. But not many people know that we had signed a MOU in fashion also between UTT and the National Institute of Fashion Technology in India. And during the visit, fashion was also talked about in a big way among other major areas of development between Trinidad and Tobago and India. So we would have many such areas of collaboration to follow through in the course of pursuing the gains of the visit. So with these words, I thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and once again, heartiest congratulations to Dr. Satyanarayana Balkaran Singh. Thank you all.
High Commissioner for India, Your Excellency Malay Mistra, Mrs. Hassan Ali, honored speaker tonight, Dr. Sat Balkaran Singh, Professor Janet Morris, Associate Provost, Professor Hollis Liverpool, Professor of Cultural Art, and all other protocols being observed, staff and students of UTT. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would like to first take this opportunity to convey apologies on behalf of our chairman of the Board of Governors of UTT, Mr. Curtis Manchun, who unfortunately could not be here for this evening's postgraduate assembly. Mr. Manchun was scheduled to deliver the keynote address this evening, and as a result, it is now my pleasure to present this address at his request. And Hollis, he has personally apologized for not being here. He wanted to hear you and Dr. Balkaran Singh. So, according to Mr. Manchun, on behalf of the Board of Governors of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, I'm especially honored to be present for this evening's postgraduate assembly lecture on Trinidad Space Speaking Through Indo-Trinidadian Rituals and Festivals, 1990 to 2009, which is to be delivered by our very own Dr. Sat Balkaran Singh. As chairman of UTT, I had the pleasure of being at the 2011 presentation of graduate ceremony when Dr. Balkaran Singh received his PhD degree in cultural studies. He is only the second person in the university's history to receive a doctoral postgraduate degree. We can all agree that this is no small accomplishment, and in fact, this is the feat that is deserving of our respect and admiration. I am truly pleased this evening to be present for yet another milestone along Dr. Balkaran Singh's journey. Quite recently, I had the honor of representing UTT during the Prime Minister's bilateral visit to India. I'm interested to see if Dr. Balkaran Singh's research will incorporate any of the areas or people with whom we came into contact with while in India. Many of you may know that UTT signed a memorandum of understanding with India's leading petroleum university, the Pandit Deen Petroleum University, during the bilateral visit. This type of strategic alliance will benefit both our graduates and the petroleum industry within Trinidad and Tobago and abroad. UTT will soon continue its thrust into the energy sector with the rebranding of the Point Lisas campus to that of the UTT Energy Institute. Recently, Senator the Honorable Fazil Karim has said that UTT has a key role as a technological university in ensuring that innovations and new developmental opportunities in the energy sector are brought to the fore, just as other universities are doing around the world. I would like to take the opportunity this evening to register my agreement with the Honorable Minister and to reiterate that it is our responsibility at UTT to add value to Trinidad and Tobago through our research and our graduates, and our capacity to contribute to areas of national development. At UTT, we are seeking to create a more holistic graduate, one who can maximize the theory acquired in the classroom, as well as master the application necessary to excel in the workplace. It is said that knowledge is not information, it's transformation. As the National University of Trinidad and Tobago, UTT is obligated to provide quality tertiary education which will empower communities and assist in the transformation of our nation. In 2012, Trinidad and Tobago will celebrate 50 years of independence. Traditionally, a 50th anniversary is considered the golden anniversary and is marked by gifts of gold. Not only is gold a beautiful metal, but it is also strong and resistant to corrosion. Individually, we must all remember that we have a part to play in ensuring that our beautiful island remains strong and withstands the erosion of values and morals that we seemingly have on a day-to-day basis. To do so, we must nurture leadership within ourselves so that we can further extend these qualities to this generation and the next. It was Bill Gates, chairman of Microsoft, who said, "Leaders will be those who empower others." I feel confident this evening that I can paraphrase Mr. Gates' quote by saying, UTT graduates will be leaders who empower others. And we see this principle in action in this very room. This lecture and many other research lectures to come will continue to add value both to the university community and to the nation as a whole. The vital feedback gathered at symposia such as this is significant to both the researcher and the university. A most critical component of UTT's development is in its research agenda. The university recognizes the importance of multidisciplinary research and has initiated a number of postgraduate programs which will assist us in becoming the center for value-added research and development in the Caribbean. UTT continues to demonstrate its commitment to research through our School of Postgraduate Studies. This evening, I would like to again give my full support to the Academy for the outreach work which is being spearheaded through the staging of the Distinguished Lecture Series and the Postgraduate Assembly Lecture Series. I wish you every success as you continue to raise public awareness of the various research initiatives being undertaken at the Academy and UTT by extension. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.